So this time I want to talk a little bit about three emotions that commonly keep people from being authentic. And I'm going to say, I think that the first two you might know, and the third one may surprise you a little bit. So I'm S.G. Brownlow with Adept Psychology, and the first one I think we know. If we think about it, it's sort of trendy to say fear. Fear would keep people from being authentic. And I think that's true, but only at the very beginning stages of the quest. What I found is that when people generate the courage to admit to themselves and to other people that they're living inauthentically and that they don't like it and that they're ready to change that and begin to live authentically, that amount of courage is enough to see them through the process. It's just the courage to get started that's really all you need. Now, there's this idea that maybe people would continue to be afraid. I mean, what happens if you are authentically yourself and you show people who you really are? And what if people don't like you if you let them know who you are? And I think that's overblown, actually. What happens, actually, instead is that as people become more authentic, they become more joyful, they become more love-filled, they become so filled with really positive, rewarding, reinforcing emotions that it feels so good to be themselves that the concern about how other people are going to react who might not like them when they're not sure, it might cause pause, but the courage to just move on and do what they need to do is sort of a road bump. It's more like, oh, I need to do this. Oh, people might not like it. Okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway, and then we'll move on and see how they react, and we'll deal with the relationship aspects of it later if we need to. And generally, people find out that they really don't have to deal with it too much, that things are pretty much going to be okay. So if fear's really not the problem, the second one is what most psychological minded people might say shame. And shame and related emotions and beliefs really can be a problem for a while because shame is by its nature kept secret and it's full of stories. We have an awful lot of our identity is wrapped up in our stories about times that we were shamed. And those stories are very defensive and they protect us from feeling bad. They protect us from realizing how ashamed we feel in some cases. But they also keep that shame in place and they keep us from moving through it to get to our authentic selves. And so shame can become an impediment. But again, as people are filled with joy and love and whatever, when people become love and they experience that feeling of being the embodiment of love, then their belief that they're not good enough to be loved really doesn't hold a lot of weight. And so they're able to move through that fairly well. Not always quickly, but always pretty well. And they move through that and they get to what's behind that. And that leads me to the third big emotion. And this one may surprise you. Fear's not the big impediment. Shame is not the big impediment. The impediment that most people don't think of and most people don't talk about unless they've actually reached this level of authenticity is loneliness. And I'm going to say there's sort of, as you explore loneliness, there's 3 levels of it. The first, most superficial level is that as people become more genuine, they start looking around for other people who are genuine, and they find that there aren't many. And so it's very hard to find ways to relate to people at the level of being genuine, and that can feel pretty lonely. And it can feel like people are trying to force you back into a box of being inauthentic again. I think, though, as people go through that, they get to a second level, and the second level is more profound. And the second level is that people realize that it's not just about not being able to relate to people on this authentic level. It's that this person has, in many ways, been that lonely all along. And all the defenses that got worked through around the shame level really help them avoid acknowledging to themselves how lonely their life felt. And so there's a lot of self-worth, kind of self-work rather, that needs to be done right about then to help people begin to explore their loneliness and put that into perspective and realize the spot in their life that it contains. But then there's a third level that's even beneath that. And that third level is that as people start working through some of their own loneliness, they start realizing that really what they're picking up on is the loneliness of everybody around them, that everybody else is continuing to use a lot of defenses to avoid acknowledging how lonely they feel. And so a lot of the loneliness that our person might feel is because of the people around him. Well, at that point, it becomes much easier to deal with loneliness because now it's no longer my problem. It's a universal problem. It's the way that people program themselves to continue suffering. And so dealing with that is fairly simple. You deal with that the way you deal with any suffering. You deal with that by becoming loving and compassionate and helping people find ways of dealing with their life that bring them less suffering. And as you do that, you help them come closer to their authenticity, which then gets you back to where you're dealing with them on a more authentic level. And so that first level of loneliness becomes less powerful for you and for them. So this has just been a brief video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you are finding that you are living your life inauthentically and you'd like to explore what it's like to live more authentically, please contact me. I'd love to hear from you and see what we can do to help you.